in our work so far, there have been a few challenges, and I'm sort of wondering how they can be dealt with here. One is just people being a little confused about adaptation versus mitigation or resilience versus sustainability. And another one is what you mentioned about impacts being different in different places. So in terms of giving guidance on what people should do and then being able to apply criteria for whether or not something counts, you need to have an understanding of what that particular place is vulnerable to and whether the proposed solution will help with that. So does it come down to the board to sort of sort that out and decide what qualifies or what doesn't, or would there have to be a list of actions that count so that it doesn't get too messy?
That's a really good point. What's your name?
Nora.
Because what you're looking at is what my original idea talked about that I haven't even talked about. I really saw two levels of boards. I saw an advisory board that had people like Klaus Jacob in it, really top-level thinkers. And then you need more of an operating board. And I think what Joaquin and company are starting to develop is the equivalent of LEED. LEED for sustainability. That wheel project, it looks like it's going to go platinum LEED, which is really good. And I now understand what it takes to go from gold to platinum. And once again, we were pushing hard because it was our theme, sustainability. So we're going to do platinum LEED. The same thing is going to happen with, let's call it sustainability and resilience. In other words, we have to link them together because the sustainability is so profitable, given what Richard Muller showed us, that if I put in $1 and I can get back the money in 5 years, I got a 20% return. Well, part of that, if I only wanted to get a 10% return, I can do resilience efforts that don't have a payback. So you can link that, but it needs a certain level of board to decide. A fellow from the UK who liked this idea said, when they have to do this $100 billion every year starting in 2020, it's for places like Kenya that have to decide on the kind of variety of coffee that they're going to make, because that's going to determine the economic viability of that whole country, because coffee's a big issue. So would I say no to giving Kenya money for coffee? No, that makes so much sense. So you need to have a sensitivity. If it's going to be on an international level, it requires so much thought, and that's why a lot of people have to get involved, and a lot of money has to come in for this. And you know what? You know better than me because you're part of USAID. I don't understand how your organizations are structured. I only know how for-profits are structured, which maybe is not so bad because we spend a lot less money than nonprofits a lot of times, or governments. When we were doing this PPP, they call it, public-private partnership, the city of New York kept saying, you do that. Please do that. Build the parking garage. Maintain the stuff. They kept saying, you can do it better than we can. So, the issue becomes, if you're an NGO, how do you get the for-profit and the not-profit and the governments working together? And I don't think there's enough for-profit involved, to be honest with you, because there's like a taint. If they say if you involve a for-profit, it's going to get tainted. And sometimes that's true. So there's a very delicate balance. And I think NGOs are starting to understand that, and that's why these PPPs are really important. Because if you can get something like in Africa, solar makes so much sense in Africa. You've got a lot of sun. You've got, areas in South Africa, other parts of Africa where solar and cheap labor, you have the ability to do solar in a big way. So to answer your question, I think you need two levels of board. And if you're going to go international, you need local boards. And then they have to report to the operating board. And then the operating board has to report to the advisory board. And I got to tell you, I never even thought of that until just this minute. So I only had an advisory board. But if you want to go international, I think that's the level of organization that you need. Don't be so high level that you're not flexible. I think you want to be flexible, especially internationally, that somebody's going to be able to say, oh, it doesn't fit in the box, but maybe the box isn't right. And then they got to be able to go to the right people. So I think you need 3 levels of board.
Hi, my name is Brendan. I work with the Land Institute on I'm sort of still a little confused about the critic. I want to ask about that. But one thing I was thinking about the Chris, it sounds like the idea was to combine both resilience along with energy efficiency in the financing models. And I came from kind of the sustainability side of things in California and with the PACE programs, and I think it might be challenging to do that just because of the way that they're set up. I'm not sure what the utilities interest would be in resilience projects as much. And the other thing is that commercial office buildings, 5 years tends to be the cutoff. I mean, they won't finance anything with a payback that's longer than 5 years, even if it was 15% still a great return. Right. But you're only talking about the lowest of the low-hanging fruit. Some of these programs, utilities already have them for kind of no money down on-bill financing, and we don't see a lot of people taking advantage of them. So that might be a challenge in terms of how to get the word out. But I think the biggest problem may be that even the energy projects do actually have a payback, but the resilience projects don't. They're going to cost a lot more, and they're going to have very unclear payback. Maybe it comes back to the insurance rates that you mentioned. My understanding is that most of that is underwritten by the federal government, where it's available, and it's, as you said, dramatically underfunded, and hopefully it can get fixed through their waters. So I'm just curious about kind of the actual payment mechanism for Chris. But maybe you could walk me through again, because I'm still confused. I think somebody was asking the critic. I pay my taxes throughout the year; it's getting withheld, and then I file my taxes, and somehow this, the 2,500 or the 3,750 is available back to me as a credit. And then I guess I wasn't clear where the kind of resilience project part comes in.
Okay. All right. Let's focus on that first, and then we'll go to the other part of the question. With the critic. Let's just take that $50,000 taxable income. Taxable income is not the gross income. It's like line 38 or 43. I'm not an accountant, but it's towards the end. And then right after that is the bummer where it says amount owed. So when you have that taxable, and let's say you owed $11,000 of federal taxes, with the critic. The 2,500 is like an IRA. Let's say it was due by April 15th. You could fund it any time during the year, but you had up till April 15th to fund it. So when the accountant is doing your taxes, they're going to say, well, you should put 2,500 into this critic, because what it'll allow you to do is to get back $2,500. Instead of you've withheld 11, you're going to get a refund check for $2,500 from the federal government. The state of Virginia, in that example, is going to give you $1,250. So it's really, it all happens on April 15th or August 15th if you go on extension. That's when you get it back. Now you could do it January 1st of the year if you wanted to, because it's a public good, but it also is something that you're getting an immediate benefit.
This doesn't make any sense to me. You're getting money back to do what?
Okay. So now it goes into what I call the natural resilience fund. Okay, this resilience fund has nothing to do with sustainability at all. Okay, remember, let's not talk about Chris. Let's talk about critic. Critic's idea was for only infrastructure projects in a particular state that required resiliency that couldn't be financed through on-bill financing or any sort of mechanism. And let's say they had an environmental bond of $1 billion in the state of California. And they had projects that were $1.1 billion, but they only had $1 billion. That extra 10% is what I saw the NRF funding through the tax credits. So the fund could be part of the federal government. It could be an NGO. I don't think it's going to be anything other than those two. It's not going to be a private entity. It's going to be some sort of quasi, non-for-profit entity.
It's just putting the power of the pen in an individual to write a check to somebody else besides the federal government.
No, you write it to the federal government. No, you write it to the federal government. In other words, or the Natural Resilience Fund. If it's part of the federal government, then it's still the Natural Resilience Fund. The question is, and that's why in that slide I went back, what is the structure? should it be a non-governmental organization or part of a municipality or even an international organization? The investment tax credit has to start with the federal government and the state government. So are they gonna take the money in and are they gonna dispense with it? I would think more likely than not they're gonna want to because it's money that was going to go for income taxes. So I wanna fight hard to make it an NGO. I don't want it to be part of an agency. I want it to have that structure that I talked about where experts and some public experts as well are involved with these levels of board.
I guess I'm still, so if that money is not actually being refunded to the tax.
It is.
But then how can you guarantee it's a refund? If you're just cutting me a check because I owe less taxes, it's a tax credit.
No, remember, let's just take it through where day one, you invested $2,500 in the Natural Resilience Fund. You did it on either January 1st.
Right, but before that, why do I have to invest in I only
To get the credit, to get the money back on your refund, Does that make it clearer for you?
It does, but I guess what I'm just wondering is the fund itself. Then, would it be more streamlined just to have the government dedicate a certain amount of tax revenue for these projects?
No, that's where the issue becomes. Now you're just trying to convince a government to give money for resilience. And that simplicity sounds good, but nothing will get done. When I said
I'm equally concerned the other way that you're proposing, that nothing would get done either, so.
well, if it got enacted, and the key is it's got to be more than 1-to-1. In other words, if it's not more than 1-to-1, let's say the legislators said, we're going to give a 30% investment tax credit like they do for solar energy, right? It's not exciting. Companies like GE are not going to give tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars or however the government allows it, whether I've used 5% of their taxable income. A company like GE earns billions of dollars a year. A company like Exxon earns billions of dollars a year. That's better to get Exxon to invest in resilience than to give them a tax credit for oil drilling, But I think if you go with the simplistic way, you will not generate the buzz. See, I'm a for-profit guy. I know what happens when you give tax incentives to individual and corporate taxpayers. It's very powerful because their accountants are smart and they say, why would you not do this? This is money you would have sent to the government anyway. But if you don't get that bang for your buck, you won't get the big dollars. And I think, how do I convince people like you, ordinary, regular taxpayers, that this is not some scheme, to siphon money off that would normally go? Because that's your initial, inclination. But remember, this is not going to a for-profit entity. It's going to either an NGO or a municipality. In the end, it's going to be earmarked only for resilience in a particular state. Is that unclear?
So what makes sense to me, if you're asking me as an individual to do something like this, is it would go towards my situation where I would be maybe installing solar panels or something at my house.
There's already a credit for that.
So
There's already a
this
30%
idea
investment
that
tax credit.
you're just giving me the power to redirect my tax money to this other thing.
Well, this other thing, let's say you
Which is a fine thing.
Well,
but just not-
let's say you live in the Chesapeake Bay. Okay? Oh, that's
You got our attention.
Okay. I don't know much about the Chesapeake Bay, but I'm sure you got issues. And one of the issues that are coming with New York City, like for example, oysters used to be Staten Island's biggest economic benefit in the 1700s, and they're trying to bring back oysters. I don't know how your shellfish is in the Chesapeake Bay. Maybe it's an issue, maybe it's not. If we could help that industry in the Chesapeake Bay through resilience efforts that also worked on potential flooding of the bay, I don't know. I'm just talking out loud.
I'm working exactly right now in stormwater banking. So I'm working in this area right now, and in construction, they're having to pay for stormwater banking, and they pay a farmer to do stormwater banking on their farm, and they get credits for that, and they trade.
And that's,
So
but that's
It's like
carbon
nutrients.
credits?
No, it's nutrients. It's nitrogen and phosphorus moving in sediment
Right.
moving into the bay.
But what is the financing of the credits?
The financing is coming from the TMDL, which is forcing the construction folks to have to manage water quality on site or buy credits and manage it. They already have to do quantity management to actually improve the overall loss of nutrients into the bay. They're trying to pay in another location to better manage nutrients there. Either that or they can do it on site and spend probably even more money trying to do it on site. So there's
Okay, so the trade-off is you're not gonna do it on-site, you're gonna do some credit in another area.
you may not have space to do it on site.
Okay, okay, so they